What's up, guys? This is Chris Surratt bringing you another edition of the Car Concierge Show, the show that helps with the buying, selling, maintaining, and repairing of your vehicle. On today's show, we're going to talk about wildfires as they happen over in Canada and they disrupt driving over in Minnesota and some other states here in the U.S. After that, we're going to talk about Tesla, as we always do, and how the problems with Tesla continue to follow Elon Musk as he finds himself in another lawsuit for another one of his facilities in California, as they talk about how there's cases of fighting, racism, and drug use in that facility. And last but not least, we're going to head over to the politics of situation again and talk about tariffs as they start to figure out how the pricing on tariffs is going to start to really affect automakers and who's going to really feel the burn when it comes to buying and selling cars. Alright, so let's jump straight in. I am, of course, a guy that lives in California, so I do know about wildfires fairly well, but fairly recently. I didn't know about wildfires before I moved to California. Didn't really know they were a thing until I tell the epic story that I always tell. When I first moved out here to California, I was working over in Monterey at a little hotel, setting up some stuff outside in the fresh air when what I thought was snow started to fall down upon me, only to be laughed at by the other workers and to be explained that it wasn't snow, it was ash from some California wildfires. Well, there seems to be a situation over in Canada where they too get massive wildfires, and it's starting to affect people over in the U.S. to the point where the Minnesota Pollution Agency, Control Agency over in Minnesota decided that they were going to issue a cease on people driving. Let's check that story out. Alright, so and this is pretty much a story just stating that millions of Americans are urged to avoid driving due to the California wildfires that are affecting Minnesota. And let's see. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, MPCA, has issued a statewide air quality alert from Sunday, August 10th through Tuesday, August 12th due to heavy wildfire smoke drifting in from the Canadian provinces of Saskatchewan and Manitoba. Millions of residents, including drivers, are being urged to limit travel and outdoor activity as air quality worsens across the state. Why it matters. The wildfire smoke has caused fine particle pollution levels to rise into the unhealthy range in many parts of Minnesota. Breathing in this smoke can aggravate respiratory and heart conditions, leading to symptoms like coughing, chest tightness, and shortness of breath. For those who spend extended time outdoors, exposure to poor air quality poses an added health risk. Drivers in particular should consider avoiding non-essential trips, especially those with pre-existing health conditions. Alright, so what we're going to do now is we're going to check out the story that Fox 9 over in Minnesota is doing on the air quality over in Canada. Let's check that out real quick.
Canada, of course, are a leading cause of our smoky skies, but it's not the entire story here.
Yeah, Rob Olson joining us now. So, Rob, help us sift through some of the smoke here. You spoke with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. What are they saying about this trend of poor air quality?
Well, you know, I've had people even say to me, I don't remember this 10, 20 years ago or growing up that we had summers like this. And you're right, we didn't. You know, we really had it bad a couple of years ago and again this year with smoke from Canadian wildfires. And these 2 years have something in common. And what that is less snow, which basically left those forests ready to burn.
What's happened in Canada in 2023 and this year was drought.
Ryan Leake is a meteorologist with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, which means he's getting a lot of questions about why we keep dealing with smoky skies here because of fires in Canada. Why can't they just put them all out?
There are so many wildfires where the firefighters have to prioritize which ones to put out.
He pointed me to this map from NASA. These are fires that are over 10,000 acres. So many of them and so big that crews simply can't fight them all at once. They have to focus on those that threaten where people live and less attention paid to the millions of acres further north that are sparsely populated, have few roads, and are hard to reach.
We have the wildfires in place. They're going to stay there. But it's just a matter now of, when will the wind direct that smoke towards Minnesota?
Water drops are pretty futile when it's that big of a fire over that vast of an area.
Ralph Bloomers is a documentarian and wildfire expert in Oregon. Emphasizes this is not Canada's fault. The forests there are massive. Recent mild winters have made them very dry. Higher summer temperatures and low humidity have made those fires tough to put out.
I was just talking to some pilots in Canada who fly over these fires, and they're dropping 1,000 gallons, 2,000, 3,000, maybe even more gallons of water at a time. But when they drop that water, a lot of the atmosphere is so thirsty, it just vaporizes.
Yeah, and those areas also of forested Canadian wilderness so vast as well that prevention efforts are pretty much next to impossible too. Again, just too big and too remote and too hard to reach. Now, in terms of the fire season, the MPCA stresses that we got another month and a half of fire season. There's a lot of them going on up there. So again, depending on which way the wind blows, if it starts coming back south again, which it will at some point, you'll probably be dealing with this on more days yet this year. Live in St. Paul, Rob Olson, Fox 9.
Yeah, I have no doubt. Thanks, Rob.
Well,
Yeah, it's, being that I deal with wildfires pretty regularly here in California, of course, we never see it be a situation where the wildfires would or have stopped me from getting around or going about my business and doing everything I standardly need to do. And it's really unfortunate that these Canadian wildfires are so bad to the point where they're affecting these, Minnesota and other states that are around the Canadian border. And of course, the U.S. states pretty much can't do anything about it. And I understand that, of course, because of the wildfires here and the forest areas that burn here and how hard they get to, I understand all of that. And I know understanding it makes it a lot more difficult. But I'm still thinking about, like he said, this is a new thing. Why is it happening like this now? Now, I'm not a believer in global warming, so I don't think it's a situation like that. But I do kind of think that it might be a situation where people are starting to set these fires. Specifically out in these remote areas, in these forest areas, that would standardly, of course, since it's Canada, they would get snow and that would prevent some of these fires from erupting. Maybe these areas are a lot drier than they used to be, but I do see to some degree some human activity when it involves this. And just like and that's always been a thing, specifically out here in California, even the LA fires. There's a lot of fires during the LA fire situation where they understood or suspected that people were setting these fires. They were catching people setting fires in certain areas. And I kind of think that to some degree that's happening over in Canada as well. It's just too massive. You saw the map, all of these fires, it just seems excessive to the point where, it's all being caused because of a hot summer and a dry winter or dry situation that is just being set by natural occurrences that never happened before. The fact that it's just never happened before and it's all of a sudden happening now, and they're coming up with these random ideas on why it is. It didn't get enough snow, didn't get enough rain, all these other factors. But for me, I just have to add in the human factor, because the human factor is always, in our lives, the most important factor of all. People who are hiking, cigarettes being thrown down in these areas, people doing it on purpose. Like we saw out here in California, on purpose, setting these fires. So I believe that that's probably got a lot to do with it. It's truly unfortunate that this is affecting these people out in these states summertime, affecting their ability to drive around to their summer events or do the things that they enjoy this time of year. And that's the bad part about it. And we can only hope that, you know, Canada gets a hold of this fire situation so it stops causing all the problems over in Minnesota, and those people get a reprieve from all the smoke and they get to enjoy their summer because it's coming to an end. All right, so let's keep going. Let's keep going. Now, of course, we always talk about Tesla. It's a storyline here on the Car Concierge Show because, you know, we know the future is the EV, and if we want it to be the future of the world or not doesn't matter. But we have to report that, you know, in some of these situations, the EV is making it come up. But when it comes to Tesla and Elon Musk, their path to EV dominance has just been under so much attack. And do we believe it's been under so much attack just because of the Tesla name? No. We understand that it's been under massive attack because of Elon Musk and all of the things he's done when it comes to Doge and being friends and not being friends with Trump and all of the eccentric things that he says or does or even creates. He's been a topic of conversation for a long time. But he always seems, or Tesla always seems to find themselves broiled in lawsuits. We saw the lawsuit with the black employees over at the one Tesla plant. Another employee got, I think, $243 million for discrimination not too long ago. And here we are with another situation where he's dealing with a lawsuit at another plant here in California. Let's read it. This is interesting. This strap line is pretty interesting. Brawls, racism, and cocaine. Lawsuit reveals life inside Tesla plant where Musk was directly involved with HR decisions. And this is Justin Rorlick from Friday, August 8th. Working conditions at Tesla's manufacturing plant in Fremont, California have allegedly gone from bad to worse, with sexual assaults aboard company shuttle buses, drug and alcohol use on site, all-out brawls breaking out between the employees, and prevalent bigotry, including widespread use of the N-word, a bombshell lawsuit reveals. In a 159-page federal lawsuit filed Thursday, obtained first by the independent Ozell Murray, a former Fresno police officer in charge of security at the 22,000-person factory, claims he and his team routinely seized cocaine and fentanyl on site, confiscated guns discovered in the building, investigated acts of sexual deviance on Tesla grounds, and at regular intervals pulled employees off the manufacturing line and sent them home for being alcohol intoxicated and high on drugs. There's a joke in there that I don't want to use. Those who reported the issues were fired over bogus charges or forced to resign, according to Murray's complaint, to which several of his ex-colleagues signed on as co-defendants. Healthy profits have always been more important to the company than a healthy work environment, the company alleges. For Tesla, more bodies on the manufacturing line meant more vehicles flying out the factory door, no matter how unclean their hands were that were assembling those cars. Tesla's Model Y, Model S, Model 3, and Model X lines are manufactured in Fremont. The U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission sued Tesla in 2023 over allegations of unbridled racism at its Fremont plant. This spring, Tesla settled a lawsuit brought by a black employee at the Fremont facility who accused a manager of greeting her by saying, "Welcome to the plantation," and "Welcome to the slave house." A Tesla spokesperson did not respond on Friday to a request for comment. The complaint against Tesla, which was brought by Murray and former Tesla HR execs Linda Pellegrin, Adam Chow, Tiara Paulino, Sharniqua Martin, and Gregory Vaz, says Tesla CEO and erstwhile presidential first buddy, Elon Musk, presently America's least likable public figure, according to Gallup, was personally involved in many of Fremont's factory hiring and firing decisions. Musk was a frequent visitor to the facility, and not just for high-level photo opportunities, but to take a hands-on approach to managing, directing, and facilitating resolution of the manufacturing and workforce issues at the plant. I don't believe that. The complaint states Musk would frequently visit the plant and conduct issue resolution meetings with actual line employees, not just upper management bureaucrats. Musk would hold meetings with line-level employees from every function of the plant, from the manufacturing line to operations to HR, and issue directives right then and there to resolve the issues employees raise. If he did that, how is this lawsuit possible? The complaint goes on to describe a significant portion of car makers' hastily hired and poorly vetted workforce in Fremont as blatant racist and misogynist. Many who have worked there have likened the workplace to the Jim Crow South, an environment in which black employees and brown-skinned workers are besieged with constant racial abuse, stereotyping, and hostility, including with repeated use of arguably the most brutal and degrading racial slur in the history of humanity, the N-word, according to the complaint. Black Tesla employees have reported regularly encountering nooses on desks and other equipment, as well as seeing the N-word graffitied on walls and bathroom stalls, elevators, even on Tesla vehicles rolling off the production line. The complaint filed by Murray and his former co-workers alleges that the use of the N-word was prevalent at Fremont. In late 2021, one of Murray's direct reports, a black security officer who was also a former cop, was victimized when a Tesla employee called her a N-word, the complaint states. Murray's colleagues were so distressed by the incident and impunity with which the word was used toward her that she had to take a medical leave from work to recover from trauma. According to the complaint, yet instead of offering encouragement, Murray's supervisor counseling him that Murray should be informing all new black security personnel that the use of the N-word was simply ingrained in the culture at Tesla, and so Murray should only be bringing aboard that are willing to accept and acquiesce to the prevalence of that word in the workplace. This is crazy. In another incident indicative of the racial tension and toxicity at Tesla's Fremont plant, the complaint says a black assembly line employee working on a vehicle called out a warning after he spotted a co-worker about to do something that could potentially damage the car. According to the complaint, the co-worker, who was white, responded by angrily yelling back, Do you want to hang by a tree? Wow. Supervisors were also known to abuse Tesla's zero tolerance policy at the time for drug and alcohol use on the job. The complaint goes on. It says that if a higher up suspected an employee was under the influence, they could report the person to security, and Murray or someone from his team would then escort them off the premises. Without question, however, in many instances, the supposedly intoxicated employee did not appear that way to the security officer tasked with removing them, according to the complaint. As it turned out, many supervisors and managers were merely using the policy as a means to retaliate against their subordinates, and in particular when a line employee had turned down the supervisor or manager's sexual advances. The complaint states, or when the manager or supervisor wanted to retaliate against someone because of their race or ethnicity, or when the manager or supervisor wanted to retaliate against someone because of a complaint and the employee had lodged against them. Yet the complaint claims incidents such as these were swept under the rug by one specific Tesla manager who had an irrational fixation on fostering the delusion that the environment culture at Tesla is one of tolerance and innovation rather than racism and retaliation. Because of sky-high demand for Tesla vehicles at the time, if a violent or racist Tesla employee were to actually get fired for cause, they're regularly loopholed back in via temp agency, according to the complaint. This, the filing says, allowed them to bypass the usual background check, and oftentimes meant an employee who had been previously victimized had to actually resume working with their attacker and tormentor. Ugh. One loopholed employee had been let go for workplace violence, returned to Fremont, and promptly attacked another colleague, the complaint states. Wow. For his part, the complaint says Murray was outspoken with Tesla management about safety and security concerns in Fremont. For that, he wound up summarily fired under pretextual guise of poor performance, even though he had never once been disciplined and was promoted 5 times in his 6 years with Tesla. Murray's co-defendants all endured similar experiences, being jumped off the payroll for supposed poor performance, according to the complaint. Each of them had brought up serious concerns about issues at Tesla or had investigated as substantiated employee wrongdoing and were subsequently outright fired for doing so or resigned before they could be terminated, the complaint alleges. None had ever received any negative performance reviews according to the complaint. Murray and his co-defendants are suing Tesla on 5 causes of action, including retaliation, wrongful termination, and failure to prevent unlawful discrimination. They are seeking compensatory damages, emotional distress damages, punitive damages, and exemplary damages to be determined by a jury, plus attorney fees and court costs. Wow. That, my friends, was a read. Alright, so, whew. Wow, that sounds like a really horrible place to work. Wow, that's you know, I really think that Tesla is going to lose a lot more money in these lawsuits than it is going to lose in tariffs, which is going to be our next story. Because I don't know if it's Tesla itself or the upper management of Tesla or the big wigs, but what they're really trying to do is make it out to be that this is all Elon Musk, but it can't be. It's almost impossible for this all to be Elon Musk, and that's pretty much what you're trying to put this as. What we're experiencing is that Tesla obviously has a substantial hiring problem where they just hiring all kinds of horrible people to work at these companies, specifically in higher level positions. And their evilness and horribleness are just leaking down to all the people below them, and it's crazy. I mean, we've already talked about the other guy that worked at this particular plant that got sued and got hundreds of millions of dollars. And that is not the only case. There's been several cases. There was 3 or 4 cases of situations where people have sued Tesla and from working at Tesla factories and won and got substantial amounts of money, and it's got to definitely be affecting Tesla's bottom line. So Tesla has to step up to some point and stop hiring all these racist people. What the hell? I mean, we keep seeing all these stories about all this racism, and this story stated that there was a manager that, just to try to keep the place looking cool and looking up to par, was telling people to acquiesce and only hire people who are going to accept racism. That's outrageous. I can't, man, look, I'm not a big fan of EVs to start with, and I'm not the biggest proponent of Tesla, other than the fact that it is an American product and it's American made, and you know they have jobs that they can give people in America over in Fremont. But then on top of that, I'm not with this racism that they keep spewing on the American people at these factories, and it's crazy that they haven't put a kibosh to this to the point where they've already lost upwards of $500 million or more to these cases. Racism, I understand that racism is still prevalent in a lot of places in the world, but we've come up with ways to stop this, and the biggest way we can stop this is this: suing these people when it happens, so they can stop and they feel some sort of hurt on their pockets when they do these things that irreverently affect people. I'm not a guy that believes in, or not believes. I see racism, and I know that racism exists. And I have no fear of being called the N-word. What my fear about racism is the fear of people who are in seats of power, extorting racism on people. A person not getting a job because the person that's hiring is racist. And a person not getting a loan because the person who's giving out the loan is racist. That's the kind of racism that I would fight against. Sticks and stones, man, sticks and stones. But this is the type of racism that you have to fight against. If you have people in power who are firing people, destroying people's lives, taking opportunities away from people because they are racist, this is what has to stop. And this is what this whole story over in Fremont, I mean, it sounds to me like Fremont, this Tesla location in Fremont needs to have its whole upper echelon of executives removed and start over again. because they've already received several lawsuits about racism and the way they treat their employees. And that in itself tells you, Elon Musk, that at the very least, if you have your hands on this shop like they say you do, you need to get rid of these people. Now, if they're some of your friends, you need to get rid of them people too. Because obviously, if you have your hands on this shop like they say you do, you need to stop this, because your name is already horrible. And this is just going to make it worse. Alright, so last but not least, we're going to talk about Trump and tariffs. So, we already know, and we've been talking about tariffs for quite some time, and how it's going to affect the American people. And what we understand is truly, to some degree, to a massive degree, that tariffs are going to affect these automakers. Why? Because most of the automakers around here are doing what? They're importing all their parts, importing all their cars, and they have to stop it. They have to build factories here, like the Tesla factory, make sure the employees and executives ain't racist, and make it work here in America. But we still understand that a lot of these automakers, the Porsches, the Volvos, the Volkswagens of the world, they're going to be affected massively by the tariffs from Trump. So let's check out a quick story about that, and I'm going to let y'all get up out of here. It's beautiful. We're going to enjoy our Sunday, I'm sorry. It is Sunday.
European automakers like Porsche, Volvo, Volkswagen, they're going to see 15% tariffs on all imported cars and auto parts as a result of that recently announced deal. For more on this, we go to Yahoo Finance senior autos reporter. That would be Praz Sumaranian. Praz.
Yeah, Josh, I mean, you guys have been talking about it just now for the last 10 minutes. Yeah, that deal now in place. But for the automakers, you know, they got a little pop when we heard reports that the deal was going to happen, because there's a lot of anxiety about 25% tariffs on German luxury automobiles. Now it's come down to 15%, so that's better news than what's been going on right now. But hey, that's not as good as the prior situation where it was around 2.5% tariffs for German automobiles. So you saw the stocks of those companies today all taking a step lower, even though the deal is sort of a preliminary deal is in place. There's just a little bit of kind of yeah, it's going to impact margins a little bit. We kind of know what the hit's going to be, but it's just not fully great news here going forward for these businesses.
And these European automakers, Praz, what is the game plan with the tariff? They eat it, they take the margin hit, they pass it along to Praz and Josh, some combination of the two. What did we think?
You know, there was thought that they would, like companies like Porsche would try to push the entire tariff costs on to their customers, but as you can see, that probably just was not going to be a good idea, because the fact that U.S. consumers were not going to actually absorb that full cost. It had to become a combination of we take some, the consumer takes some, and then we'll see what happens. So, you know, we've been hearing automakers are pushing around 5 to maybe less than 10% of that cost on to consumers when it was 25%, because they just couldn't put that fully on them. You know, companies like Audi just today announced sort of weaker than expected results in the U.S. And this is because, not just because of tariffs, but because the product sort of landscape is changing. There's more competition out there. And so that combined with higher prices is not a good situation for European automakers working in America. And they have to sort of stomach some of those costs in order to stay competitive.
You know, it's interesting, Praz, because you've talked about these European automakers on the show. So now they do have some greater degree of clarity and certainty, but talk about the challenges these names still face broadly.
I mean, we're in a world where interest rates are still, 8 to 10% for a car. We talked about this earlier today about how that monthly payment has been going up and up and up. And if you're talking about a car, a luxury automobile where, getting out the door with a cheap lease is probably $500-600 a month. You're talking about much more than that when you're financing. So you have that on top of the fact that you have tariffs, on top of the fact that we have maybe somewhat uncertain economy here with just sort of thoughts on what's going to happen in the future. You also have better American products. You have better products from Cadillac that are doing well in the marketplace. Lincoln itself too with the new Navigator vehicles like that. So you have a bit of a minefield here for European automakers in the U.S. This is their biggest market. They need to be here, to perform well here. But it's a combination of things that are making it a bit more difficult for them. Unless you're a maker of Lamborghini, for instance, right? Those guys are always going to be okay because they only sell, 6,000 vehicles in the U.S. a year.
Yeah, so I don't know what y'all expect me to say. All I'm going to say is buy a Lincoln Navigator. Yeah, just, what can I say? You need to realize that we need to go back to a Buy America First situation. We have to realize that we have to support our country by buying from the products in our country and not worrying about what's going on with products that come in from overseas, worrying about the Volkswagens, the Porsches of the world, because they are not depending on us to survive. Maybe they are, but for us, we're depending on our U.S. automakers to grow and to thrive, for the U.S. to have a very successful automaking industry. And that has been suffered so much that these tariffs have been put here to assist that, to let you understand that if you're going to go ahead and buy that car from China, Japan, or any other facet that is not the U.S., then you might have to pay a higher price. If you're going to be selling your products over here, bringing your products over here for our consumers to consume, then you yourself going to have to pay a price. And you're going to be competing with these U.S. automakers that are not paying tariffs, so you're going to have to eat that, because the prices are going to fluctuate based off of that. The U.S. automakers who are not paying tariffs, they're going to be able to sell the products at a decent price. The automakers that are not U.S. automakers who have to pay tariffs, they're going to have to eat those tariffs so they can compete with the American price. And it's all a boom for the U.S. And that's all we can ask for. So, tariffs, my friends. If you didn't do the tariff buying prior to tariffs going into effect, which was a big thing when people were going out there purchasing these vehicles in fear of the prices rising, I don't really think you should worry about it, because these companies are going to eat these tariffs because they understand that if they raise their prices, they're not going to be able to compete. And then, of course, all of the places or the cars or the vehicles that are sold at the good prices that are still good vehicles are going to get bought up. And the ones that have tariffs and have raised prices are going to sit on the shelves. All right, guys, once again, lovely show. Appreciate you for tuning in. I'm Chris Surratt. Please like, share, subscribe. Hit me in the DMs if you have any questions. Go out there, enjoy your beautiful Sunday, and I'm out. Peace.